From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Another development this week in the ongoing saga involving the Department of Veterans Affairs, its commissioner, and the board that oversees it. You'll remember that we reported that Veterans Affairs Commissioner Kent Davis last month agreed to resign at the end of the year at the insistence of Governor Kay Ivey. This came after a messy interagency dust-up over federal relief funds that included a leaked and inaccurate ethics complaint and Ivey accusing Davis of mismanagement. This week, the State Board of Veterans Affairs voted to ask Davis to reconsider his resignation and stay on as commissioner. They defended Davis's and their own actions, saying at the end of the day, there were no misspent funds.
I make a motion to ask Commissioner Davis to rescind his resignation and for the board not to accept his resignation.
Commissioner Davis has done a tremendous job in what we've accomplished with this Department of Veterans Affairs in the years is his service. And I know he didn't take it lightly when he offered his resignation. And I know sincerely he means what he said. And, you know, I hate to see it ever come to that. And, but we've got to respect their wishes.
I am grateful to have served you the last almost 6 years, and I think we have accomplished a lot. It's been a real pleasure getting to know the board members, getting to work with the veteran service organizations and the many other partners, many of whom are represented in this room right now. I'm grateful that a few weeks ago I had a great meeting with the governor's staff. Gosh, almost a couple hours. We had a very cordial conversation. I think came to a good agreement, and I made a public statement at that time, and I will just stand by that public statement. I really don't have any changes to that public statement that I made a few weeks ago.
Governor Ivey had this to say in response to the board's vote, which took place after she left the room. Quote, "I conveyed a direct message of teamwork and commitment to our state's wonderful veteran community. After I left to chair the State Board of Education meeting, orchestrated theater ensued, showing a lack of leadership and quite the opposite of teamwork. I have accepted Admiral Davis's resignation, and I expect he will stand by his word. We will move forward in exploring ways to best serve Alabama's veterans," end quote. And I'll talk with reporter Alexander Willis about this issue in more depth later in the show. News on the education front. The State Board of Education this week voted to raise the score required on the state's third grade reading test. That's the first hurdle determining whether the student moves to the fourth grade. The Alabama Literacy Act was passed back in 2019 to ensure that third graders read at grade level. The law requires third graders to reach the cut score on the state's reading test before being promoted to the fourth grade. But two members of the board voted against the plan, arguing that the cut score should actually be higher. APT education reporter Trish Crane explains more.
So I just wanted it to be understood that it's a very hard decision to be made, but we've got to keep moving it forward because the ones who benefit are going to be our students. And so therefore I'm going to have to vote no against this particular cut score.
In order to look at continuing to go forward, I will vote for the 0.5, which takes us to 444, because we will remain at that level for 2 years, which means if school districts are not where they should be the first year, they will have the opportunity to get there the next year and then continue to move forward. Thank you.
Well, I think we will probably see maybe the overall proficiency or the folks that reach the cut score go down maybe a little bit next year, and we have to think about that when we report on the spring test results. But I think, you know, the idea was to raise the score a little bit at a time so that at the end of the day, you've got a score that really represents that kids can read on grade level or thereabouts.
A dramatic scene on Interstate 65 this afternoon. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency says police from multiple agencies engaged in a chase and standoff that shut down the interstate for more than an hour. Here's some video of the scene sent to us from a viewer who was passing by that Interstate 65 just north of Prattville. You can see several law enforcement officers involved, and I'm not sure you can make it out, but some are wielding high-powered weapons. Aaliyah says a woman was taken into custody and that no one was hurt in the standoff. Yeah, you can kind of see how many law enforcement, and you zoom in there and see high-powered rifles being used in a standoff situation. But again, Aaliyah says a woman was taken into custody. She was wanted in Texas for a shooting, and there was nobody hurt in the standoff. Speaking of 65, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth was in Montgomery this week and took the opportunity to tout his Go Wide 65 campaign that aims to six-lane the entire interstate from Mobile to the Tennessee line. Of course, there are current widening projects ongoing right now at known choke points in Shelby County, but Ainsworth says it's more than just about traffic. It's about economic development.
Our goal is simple, right? We want to make sure from the Tennessee line to Mobile that we have 3 lanes going both directions, 6 lanes. And so right now we're targeting the areas that have the most congestion and trying to tackle that and work our way out. The great thing about 65 is it's, a federal match. You're looking at getting 80% of federal funds, 20% of state. And so we're going to get it done. It's going to take, to get the entire project done, probably 8 to 10 years, but we're going to continue to work at it in patches and really encourage, because that's the #1 issue I hear from people across the state. I probably get a text every day or two from people that are stuck just in traffic. And you think about it, 8 million tourists going to the coast every year. It's our main thoroughfare for just, industry, right? Trucks going up and down, people traveling. And so we've got to make sure, honestly, should have been done years ago. But thankful for Governor Ivey's leadership, we're going to make sure we continue to push that because it needs to become reality.
This week, the capital city hosted the 25th Annual Attorney General's Law Enforcement Summit. It brought together officers from across the state for free, specialized training through a series of expert-led sessions. And in a poignant moment, attendees honored the late Montgomery County Sheriff's Deputy Jeremus Young, who tragically lost his life in a head-on collision while on duty in April.
Oh, I love this conference. If you look by the outpouring numbers of law enforcement from around the state, and not just here, but from around the state that come out, and if you listen to some of the topics and the speakers, this is amazing. For us in law enforcement to be able to get not only good training, but free training that's put on by our Attorney General, that speaks volumes. And so I'm just proud to be able to have my agency, to be able to be represented, to be able to come, and then for him to go outside of the box and to honor a slain deputy that died in the line of duty, which happened to be one of mine. My heart's full right now. As you can see, when the bagpiper came out, you hold back tears. It's just something that made me feel good. His family feels good, and it brought that reassurance back to them that, hey, we still love him, we still love you, and his legacy is always embedded into our memory.
Medical advancements in recent years have revolutionized research and treatment options, and soon all Alabamians will have access to life-saving DNA testing. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders reports.
Since 1941, Birmingham's Southern Research Institute has been at the forefront of medical innovation. Now the nonprofit's latest mission aims to bring personalized genetic testing to every Alabamian, advancing health care across the state.
There are 67 counties in the state of Alabama, but too often the residents of just the 4 or 5 largest counties are the ones that get access to precision medicine. Today changes that.
Southern Research CEO Josh Carpenter introducing a new program called Catalyst, aimed at providing free genetic testing for all Alabamians.
with ordering this test, every patient and every provider will have access to free genomic counseling. That will help healthcare providers inform and educate their patients around what their genetic test results are and what their risk may be.
We particularly need help in managing chronic diseases. That's an area that takes a big toll on the health of Alabamians. Chronic diseases affect, in a really significant way, about 1 out of 10 Americans, impairing their abilities to do their daily activities. Here in Alabama, probably 3 million out of 5 million people have some form of a chronic disease.
One of Khalilah's goals is to fight chronic diseases by alerting patients to clinical trials they may qualify for, offering access to cutting-edge treatments. Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth says this could also drive job growth by building a healthier workforce across Alabama.
Got to make sure we help all Alabamians, right? And so we're going to have a 67 county approach on this, and I think every Alabamian in the state will have the option to benefit from this if they want. And I think that's a win for Alabama and a win for people. And then, and then I'm curious, I'm going to probably get it done myself, and get my family. I really want to know, and I think it's great.
In the weeks ahead, kickoff events will be held around the state to educate the public on how Catalyst works and how Alabamians can sign up. Reporting for Capital Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders.
And I'll talk more in depth on this subject with Dr. Khalilah Brown of Southern Research later in the show. Florida is now cleaning up from the impact of Hurricane Milton, and Alabama is helping out our neighbors in need. Capital Journal's Randy Scott has that story.
With Helene, we opened up Garrett Coliseum as a shelter for horses and cattle. Actually got Pike Road to open up their facility, and so a lot of times we're trying to get ahead of that.
Alabama Department of Agriculture Commissioner Rick Pate has a big job leading one of the state's largest agencies.
Yeah, we say and believe it's the #1 industry in the state of Alabama, and so of course we have all the roles of protecting the consumer and truth in advertising, and so yeah, we people don't realize we operate 11 different labs around the state. Of course, 3 of them here on this campus.
His days usually start with people asking him one thing.
How's the weather affecting farmers? Well, there's not like one weather for the state of Alabama, and it's not like one crop. So a person could get to the fall and need a little rain to get another cut in the hay, or they could be a cotton farmer and want it to remain dry.
Pate says keeping an eye on changing weather patterns is essential, especially since it's still hurricane season, possibly bringing storms and heavy rains to Alabama.
Hurricane 2 back really gave us some rain we needed. We've sort of done pretty well with these storms this fall, better obviously than a lot of our neighbors have.
Weather plays a big role in the agricultural business here in Alabama. Recently, Hurricane Helene cut a destructive path through the state of Georgia, and now Hurricane Milton is set to do the same thing in Florida. Among the areas damaged, areas needed for farming and for transportation, something that Alabama ag officials are keeping a close eye on.
Our EMA department is part of the state's EMA department. So yeah, she's receiving all those communications that are coming from FEMA and Alabama Department of Emergency Management. And so yeah, and of course we're looking at how it's going to affect more rural Alabama.
Also, helping and working with neighboring states.
I've been in communication with the ag commissioners in North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, and offered our assistance.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
And I'll speak more on this subject of hurricane preparedness with Jeff Smitherman, Alabama's EMA director, later in the show. Governor Kay Ivey officially declared October 7th as Beat Bama Food Drive and Beat Auburn Beat Hunger Day. She was joined by students from Auburn University and the University of Alabama, along with their mascots, Aubie and Big Al. Since the food drive began 30 years ago, Auburn and Alabama have collectively raised more than 10 million pounds of food to support Alabamians in need.
This year, as we celebrate this milestone anniversary, we reflect on the tremendous impact we have made. 31 years of dedication, compassion, and unwavering support have transformed countless lives, filling empty stomachs and hearts with hope. Our legacy is built on the foundation of our community's strength and its commitment to care for one another.
Beat Bama Food Drive and Beat Auburn Beat Hunger represent more than just a competition between our two universities. It symbolizes our shared commitment to tackle the pressing issue of hunger that affects too many of our neighbors, families, and friends. It is a testament to our resilience, kindness, and belief that by coming together, we can overcome any obstacle.
I brought my donation for the food drive, and I'm proud to be a part of this, and I just congratulate both Auburn and Alabama for being active in this regard. Thank you very much.
We'll be right back with this week's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Jeff Smitherman, Director of the Alabama Emergency Management Agency. Mr. Director, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Tom.
Now, I know you've been director for a couple of years now, but this is your first time on the show. So can you share with us some of your background and what led you into this job?
Sure. It's actually a lifetime calling. My grandfather was a county director at Calhoun County EMA many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that kind of laid the groundwork. But I come from a 28-year military career, retired after 28 years from the Alabama National Guard, where I worked as their director of military support. So in charge of working with the state EMA and getting National Guard soldiers out whenever asked by the state to do a state mission. So that's how I came to EMA, and I served as the director of recovery operations, and then moved to the director of response operations. And then with some more personnel changes, I got promoted up to the executive operations officer. And from that position, Governor obviously selected or appointed me as the director upon that vacancy. So that's kind of a brief background of how I got to where I am today.
So fair to say plenty of experience in dealing with storms, which we're going to get to here in a minute. So yeah, we're looking at the remnants of Milton, I guess getting into the Atlantic. We're still, reeling over Helene and just the catastrophic damage it caused in North Carolina, North Georgia, Tennessee. What are you hearing from our neighbors? And I know that our state's been involved in sending aid and things like that, but what are you hearing in terms of from Florida and from North Carolina and those affected areas?
So each storm behaves differently, and each storm has different kind of impacts. And the impacts to the western part of North Carolina is pretty severe and significant. And it's really challenging for emergency management first responders in those situations where you have communities that are cut off, where the disaster has caused that, almost like a bunch of separate little islands in the western part of North Carolina. That it makes it really hard to get support in there, and it's very challenging. And I think they've done a good job at doing that. We've provided search and rescue teams, search and recovery teams, which perform a mission that no one wants to have, where you're no longer in a rescue environment, you're in recovery of remains. And they're specially trained military assets to do that, to treat those remains humanely and with proper care. And it comes with chaplain support as well. So that's an important team we sent out. We coordinate not just with state agencies, but also locals. We send out search and rescue teams. We send out emergency operations support teams, not just to other states, but also down into the local jurisdictions and municipalities. And we've done that for both Hurricane Helene support to the Carolinas and now with Milton in Florida. Mm-hmm. So a lot of state agencies answering the call. And also want to point out the Governor's Office of Volunteer Services has done a tremendous job at being a messenger back and forth between the states, identifying through her counterparts within the other states, identifying what they need and identify exactly what they need by phase of response, what's the immediate needs, and then follow-on needs. She's able to relay that to the multitude of those wanting to volunteer throughout Alabama, both whether they're providing resources or manpower support to go up and help. So to get the right help at the right time, so that it's not a backlog and a burden on the states that they're trying to support. So a bunch of state agencies here in Alabama have keyed in, and the locals have done an outstanding job as well.
Yeah, because we keep hearing about that. Like, you don't want to create a problem, right? Everybody wants to help, but there's a way to go about it. Well, look, we've been fortunate not to be hit yet this year, but look, we all have memories of some of those bad storms. I remember in the mid-2000s, it was, Ivan, Katrina, I think Floyd, all right there in a row. I know that it could be next week, it could be next month, that it's our turn. So what goes into emergency preparedness for a storm that we just really can't control?
That's something that challenges us every day. We communicate and learn from our other states, our sister states. That's a key component to that. And those I mentioned that have gone and performed these services in the Carolinas and in Florida, they'll come back to their communities, come back to us here in the state, and we will have a debriefing where we say, hey, what did you see? What did you learn? What do they do different that we could use to make us better? So that's just one small part of what we do to prepare, and we often will send teams out like that. But probably one of the biggest things is we're always preparing. And so next week, for instance, we're conducting our final planning conference for our winter weather exercise that we'll conduct in November. So we're already working winter weather now while we're in the middle of hurricane season. So we're always in 2 seasons at a time. So it comes spring season when we're worried about all the spring storms that come through the state. We'll be in the middle preparing for hurricanes. So we'll be down on the coast communicating with those local officials on their needs and any adjustments to the plans and incorporate those. So we're always working that. But the biggest thing I think the state of Alabama has done so well is that at the local level, the county engineers, the county EMA, the local elected officials, they go through this so often. They become pretty good at it. And Alabama has had a reputation of being a good state in its response efforts, and it all comes down to how well those locals do their part of it. So we work closely with them and provide information flow down and up. So we work really close with them, and it's turned out to be a really good event for us.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to scare people, but look, in the event that a hurricane does come, it doesn't have to be that. You mentioned winter weather. Obviously, tornado season is super scary sometimes. But you never know when it's coming your way. But what are some things that folks out there can do, practically to prepare themselves, maybe being more aware of severe events and what they need to be doing?
So I would probably first and foremost is pay attention to what the local forecasters and your local elected officials are asking you to do. The more you get away from that local level, the more subject you are to influences that may not be accurate and the information may not be as valuable. So I think that plays a huge part. And I think anything you can do to make yourself and your family and your residents more resilient. Not everybody is such that they can have the financial situation where they can go out and pre-stock on things. But if you're able to, that's one thing you can do. Anything that you can do to lessen that impact when it comes your way, because it will come. It will come. I think throughout the state, whether it be, like I said, winter weather or spring storms in North Alabama or flooding and hurricanes in South Alabama, whatever the threat may be, it's going to happen. And the best thing we can do is the more we can take care of ourselves and our neighbors, that's less of a stress on the system to take care of those who are in greater need. So, which is where we try to focus is focus the efforts on those who have the greatest need, and it's a huge benefit to those when neighbor helping neighbor. Because as I've heard the former FEMA administrator Craig Fugate say, he'll say the first one to help somebody is your neighbor. It's not usually the first responder. So take care of yourself so you can take care of your friends, family, and others. And another thing that's critically important is to make sure that some family member, some friend not in your area knows what your plans are. If you're leaving or you're evacuating or if you're okay, send that message, get that message to them so that everybody can find you and know you're okay afterwards. So it helps for them to know them to know your plan ahead of time.
Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, I mean, amid all the devastation up in the Carolinas, it has been just so heartening to see hear those stories of neighbors helping neighbors. Uniquely human, uniquely American. Really, it kind of gives you pride. And I have no doubt it would be the same here in Alabama. Well, Mr. Director, thanks again for coming on the show, and good luck with preparation and everything. Thank you for explaining some of this to us. Makes us feel a little bit more prepared.
Anytime, Todd. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page. You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. We reported earlier on the incredible breakthroughs happening with genetic testing at Southern Research in Birmingham. And joining me next to talk about it is Dr. Khalilah Brown, Vice President of Medical Affairs and Patient Advocacy at Southern Research. Dr. Brown, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, again, we reported earlier on this really fascinating and exciting breakthroughs that are happening on genetic testing. I want to get to that in a second, but can you first remind our audience about Southern Research and its role in Birmingham and really in the whole country in terms of biomedical research?
So Southern Research is an 83-year-old research institution, in fact 83 years old this week, that has been in Birmingham really helping to bridge science. So our moniker is Moving Science, and so we are a translational research institute, which really takes science from the basic science researches that you would see in graduate schools and upper level schools like UAB in South Alabama. So where something becomes an idea before it gets to a patient. We're that in-between stage, so what we would call preclinical. So we work through things to make sure that they're safe for patients, that they're not toxic, that we're using them appropriately in the right space, that they could potentially be advocacious for patients. And so that's traditionally what Southern Research has done for 83 years, but this step is our first step into more kind of patient-facing clinical work for Southern Research. And our goal really is to bridge what is traditionally a 17 to 20-year gap between the time something becomes an idea at basic sciences and it actually reaches a patient. And that gap can actually be longer in a state like Alabama that's 45% rural. It takes longer to get to those rural communities. So we're trying to bridge that gap and really bring the science closer to the patient.
Interesting. And I know y'all have got that construction project going on, and we're neighbors, by the way, because APT's headquarters is right there in 5 Points on the south side. We're good to be neighbors. Okay, tell me about this new project, Catalyst. It's about genetic testing. Sounds really exciting.
So Catalyst is a program that will offer free genetic testing to anybody in the state. So all 67 counties, all you need to do is you'll be able to enroll through your cell phone. There'll be a platform with an app, or you can go to a website on your cell phone, really because we want to make sure that equity piece is there. In some places in our state, rural places, we don't have the best broadband, but most people have a cell phone. So we've really tried to make sure that anybody who wants to access this program can. And so they'll be able to go in, read about the program, do an e-consent and consent to participate, and then tell us who their healthcare provider is and where they would like for us to send their kit. Their kit will be sent to their healthcare provider free of charge. It will have everything in there that they need to draw the test, and then there will be free shipping back to CCTS in Birmingham of that sample. So what will happen is it is a clinical test, so their provider will order that test through the platform, just like they would your CBC or lipid panel that you would traditionally get in your office visit. They will order it. Again, that sample will be sent. One piece of it will be sent on for sequencing and analysis, and with that, your provider will get a report back. And so what they will get back in 6 to 8 weeks is a three-pronged approach. So it will have polygenic risk scores, which is a cutting-edge technology that really can take your genetics, your current electronic health record information, and a few data points. So, it may be your height and weight, which would calculate your BMI, right?
Okay.
And so it can take those and then tell you what your risk is for certain diseases. So what we're starting with is coronary artery disease, type 2 diabetes, and breast cancer for biological females. That's intentional in a state like Alabama because our diabetes rates and our coronary artery disease rates are some of the highest in the nation. And so we want to inform people on what their risks are for those diseases before they ever develop them. That's really what gives us the best chance at having prevention, if we can tell you what you need to focus on. What are the things that you need to do? What are the things that you need to change? Are there medications that we should put you on, like coronary artery disease? Should we go ahead and put you on a statin to keep those lipids low and keep you from ever developing the disease? So you'll get that report. There will also be what's called a pharmacogenomics report. And this is cutting edge medicine that allows providers to know which medications work right for their patients. So if you've ever had a medication and you've had horrible side effects, and maybe your friend took it, worked great for them, they said, oh, you should try this, and you take it and you have horrible side effects. That's your DNA, right? And so what these reports can do is help your provider know what class of drugs are right for you. And that's based on, are you a high metabolizer? Are you a low metabolizer? Do you not have what you need to take in this medication at all? And so that can be done and help your provider to know which medications would be right for you. So instead of you going to the doctor's office and you needing to get something, let's say for, say it's a statin, and we put you on one thing and you've got side effects and you come back and say, I can't tolerate this. We put you on something that doesn't work. It's not efficacious for you. So then we prescribe you something else. That's typically how it works. Every now and again, we get it right? We give you something that works perfect. But I tell people all the time that medicine is much as an art as it is science. So we have classes of drugs and we try to figure out what's going to work best for you, but everybody is a little different. Well, this report helps you understand what works for you based on your DNA. Because everybody's different, having their own report helps them know and advocate for themselves. So if it's your primary care provider is going to know you, but the ER won't and urgent care won't. So having that report and understanding that can be very helpful. Even if you don't know all of the details of your report, if you kept a copy of it in your cell phone, it would be very helpful in something like an ER visit. And then that last piece is what's called a secondary findings report. This would be for rare disease. So we think only 1 to 5% of the population, typically based on the national data, will have something actionable in this report, but we do want to pick those people up. So whether it's long QT syndrome, which is a disorder that gives you a heart arrhythmia, so your heart can just go into an abnormal rhythm, and then you can have serious problems from that and potentially need to be cardioverted or having to be shocked to come out of that rhythm. So this tests for that. Marfan syndrome, which is a disease that we typically pick up in adolescence. Sometimes we pick it up sooner than that. But if you think of people who are tall and long, if they're not tested for Marfan syndrome and they have Marfan syndrome, they can have, again, cardiac issues where they could collapse in the midst of activity. And so it tests for that. So it tests for 84 genes that we know are disease specific. And so again, we think there's 1 to 5% of the population out there with one of those rare diseases that just doesn't know that it's in their genome.
Wow. I mean, it's almost science fiction. I mean, it's so advanced. And we do have the QR code right there on the screen. So anybody can click that, or I guess, use their phone to click that and access the catalyst. What would you say to those? Some people don't like to go to the doctor. I might be one of those type of people. But some people are apprehensive about medical things in general. What would you say to folks that might be apprehensive about the advantages of getting this test and knowing those results?
So for me, knowledge is power, right? If I know about something and there are steps that I can do to prevent it, then I would want to do that. We would never want to tell you about something that there's not a treatment for, that your healthcare provider can't do something about, right? So we're really focused on all of those things that are actionable in your care. So for me, it's like every time I get in the car with my kids, I make sure they put their seatbelt on. It's their protection. And I see that the same way for going to the doctor and getting those yearly checkups and those yearly screenings. And for me, this is just another tool in the toolbox for healthcare providers to use for their patients. So if you were in California or Boston at a place like Stanford or the Mayo Clinic, they're using this. Hospitals are ordering these tests, the pharmacogenomics panel, to know how to appropriately give anesthesia during surgeries, what medications to put patients on post-op so that they can control their pain. And so understanding what works for the patient so you get control of that immediately. And so we want to bring that to Alabama. We deserve cutting-edge technology. We deserve world-class health care. And so our goal is to bring that not just to Jefferson County, but to all 67 counties in the state.
Yeah, and I think that's the exciting part, giving access to everybody. We always hear about the importance of early detection. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We always hear about not just that, but all kinds of cancers and everything, about the importance of early detection in terms of saving lives. Talk about the importance of that, because you've probably seen this, from a doctor's perspective.
So yes, the sooner we can pick something up, the better we have a chance at dealing with it, right? So it's almost like getting your regular maintenance on your car. If you let things go, the longer they go, then you start having another issue, and it's caused another issue, right? And so there's so many Alabamians that are out there with undiagnosed hypertension or cardiac disease or borderline blood sugar levels that is causing daily damage to their body. And so as you do that, as time progresses, it causes more damage, and that's how we get to the points of heart attacks and strokes and full-blown diabetes that have secondary effects on your vision and those type things. So our goal really is to help patients understand what their risks are and really hope that that will drive change. And there are a lot of things that we can give now that really do help with prevention. So before you ever develop a disease, we can give you something that will prevent that. We talked about the statin earlier. Now there are things like GLP-1s that people are using, the Ozempics, the semaglutides that people are using. It started out as a diabetes medication, but now we know that we can use it for weight loss. And so we're finding all of these other diseases that it is helping to prevent or treat because of that medication. And so to me, that is where we are in this science. It is moving so fast. The ability to be able to help people with medications like that will continue to grow. Our goal is to make sure that Alabamians get that from the very beginning.
Now, I know that this is funded by about $25 million worth of ARPA funds, both from the state and from Birmingham. So, those are temporary. I'm curious, this seems to be like a really valuable thing. How can it be extended long term? Will it have to be funded one way or the other? And when does that funding run out?
So the funding runs out the end of 2026, and we are in talks with lots of different research organizations. So there's ARPA-H, there's NIH, there's lots of things that are funded by the federal government. It's also of interest of pharmaceutical companies. If we can help you understand what are the drugs that you need to design for people right here in Alabama that's representative of the entire nation, that helps them hone things in. It costs about $2 billion to create a drug, right? Wow. So if there's data out there that says this is the way that we should be going, or this is how we bring patients to the table, right? These are the patients that we should be talking to. These are the targets that we should be looking at. That cuts down the cost. So this isn't just about a healthcare impact, it's about an economic impact, which for Alabama is significant. We want a healthier Alabama. We want a healthier workforce. And part of that is, we think, is a public-private partnership. We need pharma companies to come in and not just do research at UAB. We do amazing research at UAB. There's amazing research done at South Alabama. We want to see that same type research done in Demopolis and Andalusia. We've got great providers. How do we bring what's called community-based or decentralized clinical trials to those areas so patients in those areas can benefit just like you would if you were in Jefferson County or Huntsville?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how it's utilized, right? And I guess that's what you're doing, some press and everything to raise awareness, because we do need people to actually take part in this so we have that data and have that buy-in. So it'll be interesting to see, how that goes. You mentioned Birmingham, UAB. I want to ask you to brag on it a little bit because, here in Alabama, maybe we don't talk enough about all that's going on with biomedical research at UAB. We know the wonderful hospital and everything, but the research is going on with Southern Research, with others up at UAB. Talk about that, because I think a lot of Alabamians may not realize just how cutting edge it is, on a nationwide and worldwide scale.
Yes, we're really excited. What we've been able to be a part of in Birmingham is amazing. The things that are being done between UAB and Southern Research and the Center for Clinical and Translational Sciences, which really does bring a network of institutions, so Tuskegee and Tulane and others into that. How do we work together to build science, to bring science, and really to move science? So Birmingham and UAB and Southern Research have been working together since the 60s, but now there are things like we've got an incubator. So what we're doing now is allowing these startup companies that typically can't afford wet lab space that can be very, very expensive. Now they can come into our incubator, rent space, and then use a lab with other companies. Again, trying to bring other companies up in our area so that, you know, will we ever be a San Francisco? We probably won't ever be that large, but we have our own niche. We have our own experts that are here. We have the Matt Mites of the world that are in precision medicine at UAB doing amazing things. So how do we bring small companies here and build those companies and really bring science to Birmingham? We have the capabilities. We have the perfect setup. UAB is one of the largest funded NIH institutions. They're building their research every day, their research dollars. And so we want everybody in the state to be able to benefit from that, and they're willing to do that, but we've got to build the pieces around it. So we're trying to create an atmosphere that brings companies here. So those things that you would see in Raleigh, Durham, or in Boston, those companies are now coming here. Alabama is a great place to live. It's affordable. It's a great place to do business. So companies are coming here to do business. So when you have the support of a governor and our lieutenant governor and our mayor in Birmingham to do these things and make it a place that biotech companies want to come, we're putting the puzzle pieces together to be able to do our own piece of science in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. It reminds me when I was interviewing Senator Shelby upon his retirement, it was kind of a exit interview kind of thing. Asked him about his legacy and what he was really proud of. He mentioned three things: the port, expansion of the port in Mobile, all that's going on in Huntsville with defense and space and all that, and biomedical research in Birmingham. I think that speaks a lot to how important it is, just on, in terms of how important it is for the state of Alabama. Well, Doc, I've taken too much of your time. Thank you so much for coming down and interviewing. We'll be following this going forward. And yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Since 1997, Alabama Public Television has provided programs, services, and resources to child care professionals, teachers, and parents. Visit aptv.org/education to learn more.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Alexander Willis, politics and government reporter for Alabama Daily News. Alex, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, so you've reported on two things this week that I really wanted to go more in depth on. We reported earlier on the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs, their board, the Board of Veterans Affairs, voting this week to ask Commissioner Davis, who has planned to resign at the end of the year, ask him to reconsider that decision. It was pretty big deal that they did that. It's essentially defying the governor, who has been pressuring him to resign. I know you reported on this. You've done a lot of reporting on it. What is your sense of why? Why has the board moved to do this?
Sure. So this has been, as you hinted at, this has been a saga that has continued for kind of a while now. I say a while, but really last month is when it exploded. Just some of the brief background is the VA commissioner, Kent Davis. He filed an ethics complaint against the head of, Kim Boswell, who is the head of the Alabama Department of Mental Health. And since that point, basically there has been some significant interagency tension. The head of the Department of Mental Health is in the governor's cabinet. That's just one point, but the long and short of it is since that point, the governor has not been happy with Kent Davis. Beyond that, there have been some allegations from the governor's office that the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs has been mishandling some federal funds, specifically funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, as they're called. And she asked Commissioner Kent Davis of the Veterans Affairs Department to step down. He initially resisted. He later had a meeting with the governor's staff, met with them, and then decided that he would step down effective December 31st of this year. So since then, veterans around the state, and that includes members of the VA board, the state VA board, have been shocked. They could not believe that he was asked to step down. I've spoken to veteran leaders from across the state, and they have unequivocally said that he has been the best VA commissioner this state has ever seen. Veterans from across the state have met Kent Davis, because he has traveled across the state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not to speak on any of the allegations about mishandling of federal funds, but why the board would do this, why they would vote to essentially ask him to reconsider his resignation that he made and submitted to the governor after a private meeting with the governor's office and with her staff is essentially another example of the veteran community's support for Mr. Kent Davis.
Interesting. And what I keep hearing, because and I think a lot of what was alleged and a lot of what went on with that ethics complaint, with the ARPA funds and all that, pretty granular. I mean, we've reported on it, but like it's probably not widely known. And what I keep hearing from some of those board members is, well, hey, no funds were misappropriated. No ARPA funds were misappropriated, which is true at the end of the day. The problem was some of the department's plans for ARPA funds were not appropriate. They were flagged by the Department of Finance, and so nothing was misappropriated, thanks to the Department of Finance recovering some of this stuff or pointing out some of this stuff. So I think that's an important point to make. Let me ask you this: do you think, at the end of the day, that Commissioner Davis goes along with the board and reconsiders his decision, or do you think he follows through with his announcement that he's going to resign at the end of the year?
Sure. It is my personal opinion, of course, but after observing Commissioner Kent Davis, after observing this whole fiasco kind of play out, it's strongly of my opinion that I think Commissioner Davis is going to step down, as he told the governor that he would. And the reason for that, I don't have the inside, but he had a private conversation with the governor's staff.
A long one, right? Like 2 hours or something like
Indeed. And since that point, in every public comment he's made about it, he has called it a good conversation, a fair agreement, and he has essentially not protested whatsoever. And even at this most recent meeting of the Veterans Affairs State Board, I don't want to say he was uncomfortable, but he was sitting there as the board was deliberating on asking Davis to reconsider. And Davis is sitting there. He finally has a moment during the meeting, an agenda item, the commissioner's report, where he gets up there and he talks about just basic data to do with the department. And he says, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says some basic objective data, thank God, because I think that was a little uncomfortable for an entire board to be pressuring him to do one thing or another after what was a private agreement between him and the governor's office. And several of the members of the VA board suggested as such that perhaps it was inappropriate for the board to, you could say pressure, you could say advocate for him to do one thing or another as it relates to that agreement that was made.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I get the sense too that the board was trying to kind of stick up for themselves, and but this issue is not going away, regardless of whether or not Davis follows through with his resignation at the end of the year. And we should also say the reason he wanted to wait till the end of the year is he's got certain things he wants to follow through on, accomplishments, and the Iron Ruck thing with Auburn and Alabama, the Veterans Home and Enterprise and all that. Well, we'll see what happens, because you're even hearing about lawmakers say they may want to get involved and modify the way the State Board of Veterans Affairs works and the department and all that. So not going away anytime soon, but thank you for kind of shedding some light on that. The other thing I want to talk to you about, you went to Israel recently. This week is obviously the first anniversary of the October 7th attack by Hamas. And so you went really, what, 2 weeks ago?
Exactly 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and so what an experience, what an opportunity. I know you did some reporting. Tell me, where all did you get to go inside Israel?
Sure, it was top to bottom. So we went from Israel's most southern border, right there, what they call the Philadelphia corridor. We were not on the Philadelphia corridor, but as close as you could possibly be within the confines of Israel, its southern border with Egypt, all the way to the northern border of Lebanon. And we were given the opportunity to speak with military officials, military in Israel being the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. We were given the opportunity to speak to advocates, to government officials, to folks in the defense industry, scholars, lawyers, prosecutors, all sorts of people. So it was a very eye-opening experience.
Interesting. Well, what did you observe? I know there's all these pictures you came back with of you talking with those in Israel. What were some of your takeaways from those that you talked to there on the ground?
Sure. The biggest takeaway by far was the, I don't want to say division because that again suggests there are two schools of thoughts. I would say the non-consensus of the Israeli public, the Israeli government, the Israeli, whatever have you, their society is very split on not only what to do to return the hostages, of which there are an estimated, I think it's 98, but around 100 still alive today, but also what to do the day after. And again, we spoke to some very strong and well-known advocates that are pressuring the government to do one thing or another. We spoke to military folks that advocate for entirely different paths forward, but as it stands today, Israel, at least from my experience, is more divided than it was a year ago.
Wow. Now, we're showing some pictures here. Is this one of the folks you met, maybe a mother of one of the hostages? Is that right?
Not a mother of the hostages. This is Irit Lahev. She was a survivor of the October 7th attack on the Nir Oz kibbutz, which is less than a mile away from the Israeli-Gaza border.
Wow.
She actually survived the attack by hiding in a safe room with her daughter and securing the door shut. It was with some put-together items. It was something like a vacuum cleaner and something like that, just barely getting by.
And I guess you can see like some char there. Well, it's not there anymore, but some actual remnants of the attack, which is really chilling.
Absolutely.
And who's this gentleman?
And this gentleman is Brigadier General Amir Avivi. He is in the reserves, but he has served in the IDF military for many decades. He was there for the Oslo Accords. He's been there with some of the highest Israeli leaders in comparison to the woman before, Irit Lahev. Very different opinions on what Israel should do going forward.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious about this too because you spoke with a diverse group of folks, like you said, different opinions about what the Israeli government should be doing and not doing. But I'm curious about their opinions of the United States.
Sure.
We obviously have a tremendous involvement in terms of arms and things like that, and our foreign policy really matters over there. What kind of feedback did you get on the United States from the Israelis?
Yeah, so that was actually a very fascinating component of the trip. The woman that you saw earlier, Irit Lahev, I had asked her what her opinion is of the United States, and she essentially said, I do not trust the Israeli government anymore. I only trust the United States government. I hope they continue supporting us.
Wow.
Because she, and she is not the the universal opinion in Israel. She describes herself as extreme left, and she is not the broad opinion, but she believes that the Israeli government abandoned her community when they were attacked. And from that comes that opinion that she thinks the United States she is more trustworthy of the United States as a supporter than the Israeli government. Now, Amir Avivi, also very supportive of the United States, of course. In fact, he advocated strongly that Israel needs to invade southern Lebanon before the November elections. Now, he did this on September 15th. That was about 15 days before Israel actually did invade southern Lebanon. However, that just goes to show you how much of a factor the United States' support and where they stand on certain issues is, even today in Israel, among all its leaders, advocates, and citizens.
That's really interesting. So he's basically saying, hey, if we need to have a military incursion, we need to do it before the United States changes its mind or doesn't have the same kind of leverage. That's really interesting. Well, look, what a great opportunity for you to go to Israel and experience all that. It helps us, be more informed, in our opinions and everything as we just watch the devastation. And thanks again for your reporting on the Veterans Affairs, another ongoing thing that we're going to be reporting on for a while. Alexander Willis, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
Tuscaloosa served as the second capital of Alabama from 1826 to 1846, when the capital moved to Montgomery. The Greek Revival and Federal-styled Capitol building was leased to Alabama Central Female College for use as a concert hall and classrooms until it was destroyed by fire in 1923. The architectural influence of the structure is reflected in many of the buildings on the University of Alabama campus, and the ruins are a city park.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.